Governor, to the floor. Morning, Governor.
Very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and Mr. President, it's great to be with you, and Mr. Speaker, Chairman Zarang, and all the members of the committee. This does feel a little bit like old times for me. I do appreciate the opportunity to be able to come down today and present to you all my last executive budget proposal here in the second term as governor. Commissioner Darden is going to be with you shortly, and of course he will be delivering a detailed presentation of the line items when he comes up. But I did want to give some highlights of the budget that we're going to be presenting, but also talk about how far together we have come over the years when it comes to our budget and the fiscal condition of the state. So I want to thank you and your predecessors for your colleagues and your predecessors for the work to make all this possible. And I also want to thank Jay Darden and all the folks at the Division of Administration for their excellent work over the years. I have obviously done this before, the first couple of years that I was governor, when the budget presentations were extremely difficult, because I don't think we were presenting a budget that anybody really wanted to enact because we were not fully investing in our priorities. But the very first thing we had to do was stabilize the situation in the state of Louisiana. That's what happened in the 17-18 years. And since then, we have been doing markedly better. But I did want to come back this morning, again, to thank you all, but also to kind of show where we've been able to go to, how far we've come, I should say. So a brief reminder, the day that I became governor, the state of Louisiana was $1 billion short in state general fund just to close out the fiscal year that ended June 30th of 2016. And the REC had also forecasted for the year that started July 1st, 2016, we were $2 billion short in state general fund. Since the first year that my administration was fully responsible for the budget, beginning in 2016, we ran a small surplus. And we have now run 6 consecutive surpluses, the smallest being in 2017, the biggest being in 2022. And the budget that we're going to present today, like those previous years, based on responsible fiscal policies, they continue to prioritize education, health care, and initiatives aimed at improving the lives of all Louisiana residents. The budget is balanced based on the Revenue Estimating Conference forecast. Once again, there are no gimmicks, there's no accounting tricks, no fund sweeps, no unrealistic assumptions. One-time revenues have only been used to take care of one-time expenditures. And we actually will present a budget where some recurring revenues will be directed to one-time expenditures. The state's rainy day fund will be at its highest level ever with the upcoming deposit of fiscal year 2022 surplus dollars. It will exceed $900 million. That's right at twice what was in that fund when I became governor. We are choosing to use cash to proactively pay down our debts, as well as to incur less debt by paying cash for projects that traditionally would be bonded out and repaid over decades with interest. This will in turn save the state millions of dollars in the future. We are all mindful as we gather here today that there are inflation and supply chain issues that are affecting the cost of delivering projects that you all have previously supported and put into various programs through legislation. It also affects every state agency because they too are not immune from inflation. In particular, construction projects, whether it's infrastructure and DOTD or coastal restoration and so forth, or where we're seeing the most challenge with respect to inflation. And we're going to keep our commitments to making these needed infrastructure improvements and investments by allocating excess dollars from current year excess in the supplemental appropriations bill to cover those rising costs. In fact, I would urge you all that the first priority on those excess dollars should be to cover the rising costs of infrastructure projects already approved by you. And there are a number of them, again, from coastal projects to highways and bridges and other transportation infrastructure. But we will have more excess dollars than we need for that purpose, and we will have excess dollars to make other critical investments with as well. And I do not think that anybody believes that a surplus is a bad thing. I will tell you, having been governor the first year when we had the largest ever deficit, and having been governor when we've had surpluses, I believe surpluses to be a very good thing. Without the surpluses we've had over the last 6 years, we would not have been able to pay down the unfunded accrued liability in our pension systems at the rate that we have. Our rainy day fund wouldn't have been replenished after years of being used to cover mid-year deficits. And we wouldn't have the state match that we need to draw down federal dollars for infrastructure projects and for hurricane recovery. And those are two really big items, because we have an unprecedented opportunity because of the bipartisan infrastructure law over the coming years to invest in infrastructure at unprecedented levels. But whether it's formula funding or discretionary grants that we will be gaining from the federal government, there will be non-federal match. Surplus dollars can be used for that. We also have a non-federal match when we try to recover from hurricanes, when we do recover from hurricanes. We've had 5 just during the pandemic, 2 of which were the strongest to ever hit our state. So for those reasons too, it is good to have surplus dollars. But more importantly, these surpluses signal a growth in our economy. We've all been working to diversify and to grow our economy. This is critically important because we all know in fiscal year 26, when the 0.45 cents of sales tax rolls off, combined with a dedication of increasing amounts of vehicle sales tax, not to the general fund, but to the Transportation Trust Fund, there will be more than an $800 million reduction in state general fund. So these surpluses help with that too, because it's been a goal of mine to make sure that that doesn't represent a fiscal cliff. And as of today, I can tell you we're absolutely on track. When I took office, the state had disinvested in higher education over the previous several years, more than any other state in the nation. Now, we've had the best budgets for education in the history of our state, investing at every level from early childhood through K through 12, and certainly including higher education. The budget that you're going to get this morning will continue in that direction. During my term, we've given teachers just over $3,000 in pay raises. This year, I'll be asking you to give an additional $3,000 pay raise to our teachers. This is how we plan to do it. When the Commissioner Darden comes up, there will be a $2,000 raise included in his detailed presentation, $2,000 for certificated personnel and $1,000 for support personnel. But we are confident that yet again, when the Revenue Estimating Conference meets in May, they will recognize additional revenue in their forecast for next fiscal year, recurring state general fund revenue that will be more than sufficient to provide the additional revenue needed for that $1,000 raise to come on top of the $2,000 that's going to be in our initial proposal. So I want to be very clear. My request to the legislature is for a $3,000 pay raise for the hardworking teachers across our state who have proven over and over again just how invaluable they are. Every year we talk about how we wish we could give them more and that they deserve more, and they absolutely do. I think this year we need to make sure that our budget reflects that. And let's give them the largest raise, I don't know about ever, but as far back as I can look, they've never received a $3,000 raise. We also know how important early childhood education is, and funding to increase both access and quality of early childhood education has always been a priority of mine, and quite frankly, it's always been a priority of the legislature. We are challenged this year because, unfortunately, the federal funding that helped get our current level of support for the program up to where it is, much of that will be going away with the end of the pandemic. To help offset this decrease, the budget that we will present has an increased amount of state general fund for child care assistance, and it's going to bring the total state support for the program to above pre-pandemic levels. But it's not enough to fully make up for all of the federal funds that are being lost. And therefore, we're going to continue to work with the legislature and with advocates to find other ways to increase that funding level. But one thing that I know that we're working on is a proposal that would provide additional funding for early childhood education through the elimination of a tax expenditure that, although not highly utilized, costs the states tens of millions of dollars each year, and we don't believe that it is serving the purpose for which it was originally created. My administration's investment in higher education is once again at a historic high, including faculty pay raises and increase in formula funding to be distributed throughout the system. In addition, we've once again fully funded TOPS, and we also are allocating additional funding for GO grants, which are need-based aid for higher education for students who are not on TOPS but have a financial need to make sure that they can stay in college and complete. We're going to tackle more deferred maintenance expenses at our higher education institutions as well. And even though we have significant funding available to us this year, you never have enough to cover all of your needs, and that certainly will be true here as well. But we're going to make tremendous progress toward keeping our higher education campuses beautiful and thriving, but also with an increased emphasis on safety. So I'll be asking through the Capital Outlay Program to enhance safety on our college campuses. That will come in a variety of ways based on the needs of each of these facilities, these campuses, but certainly will include things like better lighting, security cameras, and other measures. Our colleges and university campuses are our economic growth engines, and their students are the very definition of our future, which is why we should do everything we can to protect them. And as federal funds decrease back to pre-pandemic levels in the Medicaid program, so as the enhanced FMAP ratchets back over time, the budget also provides the funding necessary to keep the program stable and preserve health care for those who are in need. I do want to thank all of you for passing last year's one-time 20% supplemental pay increase for qualified first responders. As you will recall, last year I had asked for that funding, but I asked that it be made permanent. That is not what happened. So again, I'm asking that we make that increase in supplemental pay permanent this year. I don't think anybody would argue that our law enforcement personnel and firefighters don't deserve that. Recruiting and retention imperatives demand that the supplemental pay increase be made permanent, and I'm absolutely sure no member of this legislature is interested in anything that looks like defunding the police. There's also more funding allocated to hire additional child welfare workers in the budget that we're going to present. Also, as you are aware, since I've been governor, I've been asking that we increase the state minimum wage, $7.25 an hour. It's unacceptable. It was unacceptable in 2016. I think it's downright immoral in 2023. But we will again be asking for a minimum wage increase in the upcoming legislative session. And we really hope that the legislature will see fit to pass that this year. But the state government can and will lead by example, and so we will use the powers that I have to raise the minimum wage for state employees to a minimum of $10 an hour. And that will be reflected in the budget that you get as well. So I thank you again for your work. And times have been challenging, In many ways, especially as it relates to the fiscal condition of our state, we're in so much better shape today, and I appreciate all of the work, the cooperation in making that happen. I think we all intend to do this with everything we do in life, and that's to leave things better than you found them. We're certainly on track to do that with the state of Louisiana, and we're keeping that promise by working with you to put our state in a much better place. And it is remarkable how far we've come together since the early years after I took office. And I think this budget is a reflection of that. It is focused on the people of Louisiana and the investments that we can make to continue to improve countless lives throughout the state. In short, it's a budget that I am proud to present, and it's one that I strongly encourage you to work to adopt. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come down, and I think all of you will be very interested and pleased with the information that the Commissioner will be delivering shortly.
Thank you, Governor.
I'm good.
Do you want to?
There's a question I'm having. I will.
Okay. The governor said he'll take questions. Okay. With that, Representative Miguez for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Governor, for coming down and presenting this last budget. We really appreciate you being down here. And I heard some of your comments and just a few questions on high level before we get into the details. You mentioned leaving the state in a better place before you left it, right? So my question is, and you identified a $800 million shortfall in 26, which we're all very aware of. And I know that you had a tough time when you came in your first session because you were dealt with a over $1 billion shortfall. And I'm sure it's not something you want to see any future governor go through. Under our current projections, whoever that new governor may be, on their second year, they'll have an $800 million shortfall. When you were crafting the budget, did you have that in mind? If we accept this budget as it is, does it do anything to slow down that shortfall? I see we have hundreds of millions of dollars of increases in recurring expenditures. And my question is how do we stop that $800 million shortfall in 2 years? Does this budget plan to combat that future situation? Because I know you don't want to see the next governor in the same position that you were in.
Well, first of all, the next governor won't be in the same condition because there will be time after the next term starts to take a look at the situation, keep some or all of the .45 if he or she chooses to do that and gets the support of the legislature, but there will be time to know. Secondly, I will tell you that we're certainly on track so that it wouldn't be a cliff. There will be a state general fund reduction in that amount, and that's why I mentioned it in my prepared remarks. But because we are diversifying and growing the economy and producing revenue at the rate that we are, it doesn't today present a cliff. And I'll illustrate that this way. There's no guarantee what happens in the future. But because of our sound fiscal budgeting practices in Louisiana, since I've been governor, current year excess is in an amount that exceeds the revenue loss in fiscal year 26 that you just mentioned. Should that continue, there is no cliff.
I understand your points, Governor, that we have excess funds now, and we really know the reason for those excess funds. We've had a pandemic with a lot of money coming down from the federal government. We also had some devastating hurricanes hit southwest and southeast Louisiana, which in following years, like we saw after Katrina, puts an influx into your local economy and a lot of spending going on. But I'm a businessman. I know that you have an understanding of how business works in this state. My gut's telling me that our economy, as much as we're diversified and we have a low unemployment rate, it's going to take more people to keep our economy going, which our industries out there are struggling with. Yeah. I'm not sure if that money is necessarily organic that we're dealing with now. Doesn't a part of you have some concerns that our economy will start to flatten back out and get back into a real world scenario where we don't have federal funds being injected into our economy? In this legislature, you likely will not be the governor at that time because it'll probably happen closer towards the second year of the new governor's term.
I can assure you I won't be the governor when it happens.
Yes, that's right. But do you have those concerns with the experience that you had in the legislature that if we're not very thoughtful in how we craft this budget and the growth of our recurring expenditures, that we could leave this state on a very bad foot in the second year of our new governor's term. I know it won't be the first year, but you've gone through that. We've gone through that together. It was tough times, and we just don't want to leave the next governor in that same scenario.
I don't intend to, and we're on a track right now that I just illustrated, I believe, where we won't. And, you know, you don't mention the fact that we have the GDP is at an all-time high on an annual basis. We have the lowest unemployment that we've ever had. Personal income is the highest it's ever been in Louisiana right now. And so I'm telling you that we are on a path to where that does not represent a fiscal cliff. There are no guarantees, but what I do know is when the next governor takes office, when the next legislature is sworn in, they will not be looking at an immediate cliff. And they will have time, if the forecast then indicate that there are some issues coming down the road, they will have time to deal with that. So I am comfortable with the budget, and I think this is what you're asking. I'm comfortable with the budget proposal that I just highlighted, in which Commissioner Darden is going to present. Otherwise, we wouldn't be presenting it.
And I can understand your thoughts about the current economy. I agree, unemployment's at an all-time low, personal income's at an all-time high. I think the area we have a little bit of disagreement on is that what's the source of that? I think a lot of it has to do with the influx of federal dollars. And I think we're gonna see some of that flatten out and not be so great in the coming years. And those are some of my concerns. But I guess my last question, I'll leave you this, and thank you so much for the time for answering questions, is will we be able to have a budget without a deficit in the future? Do you think we're going to have to renew that 0.45% sales tax, or do you think that this budget will put us in a position where we won't have to go back to the taxpayers and ask to renew that tax increase? Do you think your budget puts us in this position that we can be sustainable going into the future?
I know that that's the situation today because of the budgeting practices that we have followed. I can't guarantee anything about next year or the year after or the year after that.
I understand that, but that's $450 million that you're probably making plans for.
I'm sorry?
That's $450 million that you're making plans for now, for the future. Don't you think we should be a little more frugal in how we spend our dollars and increasing those reoccurring expenditures? I understand your question, and I don't know how many more ways to answer it. What I think you should do is pass the budget that I gave you, because it's based on the sound fiscal principles that have righted this ship. Yes.
That have produced all those years of surplus and excess. And why would you change directions now when we've had so much success and we're on that path to being able to successfully deal with fiscal year 26?
And I fully appreciate that, Governor. We'll take a look at it in the Appropriations Committee.
I'm sure you will.
We'll try to take a real close look at it, but keep in mind, we have had surpluses, but a lot of it's due to taking federal dollars. I would like to see our private sector be more successful organically than our state living off of federal dollars. And I know we have some disagreement on that, and I respect it, but I appreciate you taking the time to answer my questions, and you know, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Miguez. Any questions? Yes. Representative Marcel for a question.
Thank you, Governor, for coming down and presenting what I believe is a sound budget. One of the things that, some of the things that you highlighted in terms of giving the raises to the teachers and early childhood, those are some of the things that Louisiana has not invested in over some of the past before you were governor. Is that accurate to say?
Well, I don't think that anybody believed that, certainly in the immediate few years before I became governor, that we were investing as we should have in those critical priorities like higher education, early childhood education, and so forth. And that was a function of the deficits that we had each of those years. And that's why it was so important. And by the way, you create the conditions for growth by making strategic investments, and not only in education, but in things like infrastructure. And those investments are going to continue over the coming years because of the bipartisan infrastructure law, where that's a 5-year program at minimum, and those additional investments are going to continue in Louisiana for several more years to come, at least.
And doing a lot of these investments, particularly in transportation and infrastructure, the dollars that we're placing in there are also allowing us to draw down federal dollars and address many of our woes, our traffic woes in Louisiana, I believe. And I think that the budget that you put forth is responsible, and it takes Louisiana to the next level where I think we should be going. I don't think as legislators, did you know, that we shouldn't be holding on to money and not paying our people fair wages. Of course, you know, I filed a bill to increase the wages and it was not passed. So I want to commend you on at least going to $10 an hour for the state. And I think as a legislature, we need to look at what we're paying our staff that we always stand around here and clap about at the end of session, and look at some of those dollars that are left over to address those issues as well. Because we want people to stay here in Louisiana. We have to pay them fair wages. We have to have good bridges, good roads in order to attract businesses so that any governor that comes forward won't have a cliff, right? And I do believe, I know that when you leave out, the governor won't come in a position that I found myself in when I came here as a legislature, in a hole trying to figure out how to get out of it. So I want to thank you for your leadership. I want to thank you for this budget, and thank you for investing in our state, in our childhood, young childhood, because we have been last in a lot of those things. And unless we invest in Louisiana children and the infrastructure in our roads, I think we get what we've been getting in the past, being number 50 a lot of times in those areas. So thank you so much, Governor.
No, thank you, and I think you make a really good point, and it's one that I mentioned, but it was briefly. So several years ago, we weren't realizing enough revenue in our state transportation trust fund to provide the match necessary to draw down our share of federal transportation trust fund dollars. And today, on top of those normal formula funds that we would have gotten, we also have opportunities to participate in all of the funding that's available through the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is an increase in the formula, but also a tremendous increase in discretionary grants. But all of that comes with a match obligation. If you're not producing the excess revenue, you're not going to be able to take advantage of those funding opportunities. And we would be allowing those dollars instead to go to other states rather than be invested in our roads, our bridges, our ports, our airports, and so forth. So if there was ever a time to make sure that you have surplus dollars, it is now, because of inflation, because of the non-federal match obligations we have for transportation, for hurricane recovery. And to make sure that it isn't just the operational budget that the state of Louisiana is so much better off. We actually have money in our savings accounts again. And we've been able to do all of that while the state general fund has risen at less than inflation since I've been in office. It's just sound fiscal policies. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more. The governor has to leave for another meeting,
Yeah.
so do we have time for one more question, if there is a question? If not,
Well, thank y'all so much. And everyone have a wonderful Mardi Gras. It's good to be back in here with you. I think there is one more address to you all coming from this location. I look forward to that and to the session that starts in April. And I look forward to working with you every day for the remainder of my term. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and all the members, Mr. President and Mr. Speaker.
thank you, Governor, and thank you for your time.